Mercedes had been widely expected to return to regular race winning and title contention this year after being limited to just one victory in a porpoised 2022 season. However, following a disappointing start to the season in Bahrain last month, the team admitted that they had pursued the wrong development concept with the W14, with team boss Toto Wolff ordering significant changes to the car. Despite the team's current gloom, Mercedes shone in qualifying and the race at the Australian Grand Prix, with Lewis Hamilton finishing second to Red Bull's dominant Max Verstappen and George Russell in contention for a podium before his engine failed. The re-emergence of Mercedes stunned the paddock in Melbourne, but Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso was left unsurprised, having spotted hints at the previous race in Saudi Arabia, where Russell was able to stay with the two-time world champion and initially inherit a podium spot when Alonso incurred a post-race penalty in a decision that was later reversed. And Alonso, who believes Aston Martin's best qualifying session of the season so far was in Australia, believes the Mercedes team is exaggerating their current woes, implying it is only a matter of time before Hamilton and Russell are competing for victories again. When asked if he was surprised by Mercedes' speed in Melbourne, Alonso replied, "No. I think in Jeddah they were within 1/10 of the pace on Sunday to us. Here they were P2. If you read their comments, it seems that they have a car that is out of Q3, but I don't think it is that bad. It's not as good as Red Bull. No one has a car close to Red Bull, but they are getting better and they will be a contender for wins soon. They did last year and they won a race after a very bad start, so I think this year they're also showing the potential they have." For the first time in 2023, a car other than a Red Bull finished ahead of Alonso, with Hamilton coming home in second. When asked if he thought Mercedes were regaining ground after a slow start to the season, Alonso used the opportunity to poke fun at the Red Bull camp's references to the Aston Martin being an old Red Bull, following the departure of Red Bull aerodynamicist Dan Fallows to become technical director at Aston Martin. In Bahrain, Perez joked that he, Max Verstappen and Fernando Alonso were all Red Bull drivers, and that it was nice to see 3 Red Bull cars on the podium. "No more 3 Red Bulls on the podium if Checo was here," Alonso remarked. But no, I think Mercedes were also strong in Jeddah, to be honest. I think all race on Sunday I was within 1/10 of George Russell, fighting to get this extra 5 seconds or whatever at the end. So it was very, very close. But regardless of how quick Mercedes was, Russell's retirement should not be overlooked, because it could signal a turning point in what has been an otherwise extremely reliable package for Mercedes. Russell was attempting to storm back into the top 3 positions after an early red flag dropped the early race leader to 7th, with the British driver having climbed back into 4th and latching onto Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin. Russell's charge, however, came to an end on lap 18, with the Mercedes visibly slowing down the final sector of the lap at Albert Park before the engine caught fire coming through the final corner. Unable to dive into the pits due to having an Aston Martin on his inside, Russell drove slowly along the pit straight before coming to a smoky halt in the pit lane exit. Climbing out of the car as he summoned for marshals to tend to the small fire under the engine cover, the pits were temporarily closed in order to allow the marshals to recover the car. Russell's retirement is the first mechanical failure for the W14 in 2023, which is especially frustrating for the Brit, on a day where he had taken the lead at the start by muscling past Max Verstappen into turn 1. Yeah, I guess when it's not your day, it's not your day. I'm pretty disappointed initially with the decision to red flag the race, he said. "Everything we've done this weekend has been good. Qualifying was great. The start was great. The restart was great. The strategy decision was the right one. It's just a shame to be stood here right now." Russell, however, said he was proud of Mercedes' start to the season, which has seen them score points with both drivers in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, while teammate Lewis Hamilton finished second behind Verstappen in Melbourne. "I think Red Bull's a little bit out of the picture at the moment. We need to continue focusing on ourselves. We've improved the car a lot, even though we haven't brought any upgrades to the car, and we've got to take satisfaction in that we were clearly the second fastest team this weekend. But then I also take pride in the fact that the performance we did throughout has been pretty spot on these last weekends." Of course, the gap between Mercedes and Red Bull cannot be overstated, and even the scenes at Albert Park, where the W14 appeared to be more in its element, showed that. Verstappen overcame a poor first lap, sailed by Hamilton with ease, the latest display of straight-line speed advantage that Mercedes boss Toto Wolff described as mind-boggling, and showed a frightening turn of pace to turn a 0.5-second deficit one lap into a 2.1-second advantage the next. And as Max Verstappen maintained his team's perfect start to 2023, Russell believes Red Bull is still holding back its RB19 car and has not shown its full potential. For sure, they're holding back. They're almost embarrassed to show their full potential because the faster they seem globally, the more the sport is going to try and hold them back somehow. Realistically, they probably have 7/10 advantage over the rest of the field. I don't know what the pace difference looks like at the moment, but Max has got no reason to be pushing, and nor has Red Bull. They have done a really great job. We can't take that away, and we clearly have to up our game. Red Bull team boss Christian Horner claimed that Hamilton's error amplified the way Verstappen quickly extended his lead, but it was evident yet again that the RB19 can, as it did in the first two races, show a much greater advantage in the Grand Prix than it does in qualifying. There were different signs of this in Melbourne, where Verstappen had only qualified on pole by a couple of tenths. His usually cautious opening lap, for instance, was partially the result of his knowledge that losing one or two positions was not the end of the world, because he had, by far, the fastest car. The 2 laps after passing Hamilton gave a clear indication of just how much speed Verstappen has stashed away in reserves. They were each 0.5 seconds and 0.75 seconds faster. Suddenly, his rival was outside of striking distance and Verstappen was in cruise control. And after a virtual safety car period during the middle of the race, he pulled away by approximately 0.4 of a lap on average, as he moved 11 seconds clear of the battle for second, a gap that was only briefly closed by a braking error at the penultimate corner that sent the Red Bull briefly off track. Verstappen had no intention of pushing on the hard tyre, rather he simply wanted to make it to the finish line. It echoes Bahrain, where it was discovered that the Red Bulls had significantly controlled their pace due to reliability concerns. In Bahrain, the only task was to create a decent cushion, nothing else. Nonetheless, Christian Horner refuted Russell's claim that the Red Bulls are sandbagging. That's very generous of him. He'd know too well from his team about those kind of advantages. There's always an element of management that goes on in any race, because it was a one-stop race, and a very early one-stop race. Of course, there was an element of tyre management going on. Horner cited Sergio Perez's efforts to make his way through the field after a qualifying crash and a pit lane start as evidence that the RB19 did not have as large an advantage as claimed. Checo wasn't hanging about, and he wasn't holding back 7/10 a lap just because he didn't want to show it. To revisit Russell's argument, it is worth noting that F1 teams have a track record of being cautious about revealing their performance advantage. Mercedes, for example, acknowledged doing so in 2014 due to concerns that an overreaction could occur following the implementation of new rules and other changes. This was a reasonable precaution, as it's not unusual for F1 stakeholders to modify regulations in order to prevent one team from dominating. But while it is plausible that Red Bull is exercising some degree of caution, it is unlikely that the team is reluctant to showcase its full capabilities out of embarrassment. The truth is, there have been few instances where such a display has been necessary. So, what are your thoughts? Is Red Bull hiding the true magnitude of their massive advantage this season? Do you believe Mercedes has also exaggerated their W14 woes? We'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. And if you're looking for more F1 news, check out our video on Lewis Hamilton's optimism after the Australian Grand Prix. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and don't forget to click the bell button to be notified of future videos.